Good day, everyone. Today we are going to tackle about good governance. When you hear about governance, what comes to your mind? Well, in simple words, the good governance involves the rule of law. So they actually follow the rule of law itself. So they respect for the human rights and they ensure that people can lead peaceful and prosperous lives. So, before we proceed to the very exciting part, let us read first the specific objectives of the good governance. So, at the end of the lesson, the learner should be able to Number one, explain the significance of the shift in how people and nations perceive governance and how it differs from government. Number two, critically define the meaning of good governance. Three, discuss the interrelationship between the concept of governance and new public management or NPM. Number four, comment on and criticize the meanings and implications of various definitions of governance and develop your own definition of the concept of governance. And number five, trace the evolution of new public management which led to the definition of governance. Governance according to UNDP. The challenge for all societies is to create a system of governance that promotes, supports, and sustains human development, especially for the poorest and most marginal. But the search for a clearly articulated concept of governance has just begun. Good governance is, among other things, participatory, transparent, and accountable. It is also effective and equitable, and it promotes the rule of law. Good governance ensures that political, social, and economic priorities are based on broad consensus in society and that the voices of the poorest and the most vulnerable are heard in decision making over the allocation of development resources. Governance and Sustainable Human Development. UNDP believes that developing the capacity of good governance is the primordial way to eliminate poverty. Notions of good governance and the link between governance and sustainable human development vary greatly. However, both in academic literature and among development practitioners too, UNDP 1997. So, on governance and sustainable human development is um, nag-interconnected sila para ma-maintain nila ang dili pagtaas ng poverty and corruptions and then ang problems sa ato society. The need for good governance. Why governance matters. Good governance creates a strong future for an organization by continuously steering towards a vision and making sure that day to day management is always lined up with the organization's goals. As its core, governance is about leadership. An effective board will improve the organization's result, both financial and social, and make sure the owner's asset and funds are used appropriately. So we need good governance for our society and for us individuals kay para sa ato growth the way ta mag-live diri sa ato society. So sila ang naghatag ng mga regulations, mga laws para ang problems is dili mo taas kibali. I mean sila ang mag-guide sa ato, sila ang mag-control sa ato, sila ang mag-fix sa ato mga problema. Governance matters for us because need nato ang good governance para sa ato kay dili sa tanan panahon makaya nato na kay kun once manggod kita ang magbuot sa ato amura dili na nato makontrol nato gulingon and nato societies magkagubot, so we need the guide of good governance, sila
Key
ang kuan
actors in
authority sa ato.
governance. Actor in governance. State. Creating favorable political and economic environment. Business sector. Create opportunities for people. Civil society. Mobilizing people participation. The local government. As the part of the state, the local government perform a crucial role in the effort of national government in implementing its program and project. The local government is the real actor in the effecting governance and development. The local government also maintains a political order and provides necessary resources such as technical expertise and infrastructure to the various groups, most especially to those who are placed at disadvantaged position. The private or business sector, corporate governance. In the government's parlance, the private business sector serves as the engine of the society. It is an important collaborator in the economic development of the community. It generates job and income to the people in the community. Because of its resources, financial and technical expertise, it can assist the local government in coming up with an economic plan for the community and help in the implementation of the plan. 3. The civil society. The civil society consists of complete citizens and group outside government working in the public arena. It is often called a CSO's civil society organization, and also sometimes referred to as the third sector. This sector plays an important role in the facilitation and interaction among the key players of the governance. It's mobilized the various group or organization in the community to participate in planning decision-making process. In the local governance, a critical role that our civil society plays is provide forum for the airing grievance, complaints, concern, issue and problem among the populace. It's provide voice in articulate and unarticulated. It also reforms some political rule in the community by serving as an instrument check and balance on the power of the state and local governments and business sector behavior. It is seen as a claim holder of basic human rights. It can serve as the alternative delivery mechanism for the frontline service.
The private or business sector corporate governance. In a governance parlance, the private business sector serves as engine of the society. It is important to collaboration economic development of the community because it is a resources such as a financial and technical expertise. It can assist the local government in coming up with an economy plan for the community and help in the implementation of plan. In the field of information technology, the private sector can help the local government in the development of technology that would help to proper the growth and development of economy of the community. There are the example of private sector. Business is the Apple Inc. It is a multinational technology company that designs, develops, and sells consumer electronics, software, and online services. Apple's operate the various sector such as a smartphone, computer, tablet, and streaming services. The civil society. The civil society consists of the complex of citizens group outside the governance working public arena. It is often called as CSO, civil society organization, also sometimes referred to as the third sector. The civil society comprises the academic or school NGO, Association of School of the Public Administration in the Philippines, INC, ASPE, INC, House of the National College of Public Administration and Governance, which is religiously collaborating with governance and NGO, GOP, UNDP, Program Galing Pook Foundation, Social Watch Philippines, SAN, IT, etc. is promoting governance and development. Another civil society groupings include post and the voluntary group. The sector plans important the role in the facilitation and interaction among the key players of the local governance. Examples: a group of environment activities working together address climate change. Let's call them green earth advocates. Figure 5 urban actors. The urban shape the city formally and informal is well organized. The urban middle class, uninformed, uninterested, disorganized, but has greatest potential to bring about the change. The urban poor suffer the most, are exploited but being to get organized. National provincial government decision makers, potential local decision makers, formal business decision makers, middle level government officer, national and local education providers, expert private sector employees, CEOs, POV, daily wage earners, low level government employees, worker in the informal sector, women. Relationship between governance and human development as performed by the each domain of governance. Each domain of governance, state, the private sector, and civil society has unique role in the promoting sustainable human development. The state in the countries where electoral process exists, the state is composed on the elected government and executive branch. The private sector. The state is being forces development but is not only one. Sustainable human development depends in the part on creating jobs that provided enough income to provide living standard. Most states now recognize that the private sector is the primary sources to opportunities for the product employment. Equitable growth, gender balance, environmental preservation, expansion of the private sector, and responsibility effective participation in the international commercial cannot be achieved by the market alone. However, state can foster private sector development that is sustainable by creating a stable macroeconomic environment, maintaining competitive markets, ensuring the poor, especially women, have easy access to credit, nurturing enterprises that generated the most jobs and opportunities, attracting investment and helping to transfer knowledge and technologies, particularly to the poor, enforcing the rule of law, providing incentive of human resources development, protecting environment and natural resources. Civil society. Civil society also has to protect the rights of all citizens as the state and the private sector are being reshaped and the relationship defined. Civil society is changing in important ways. Expansive government and unrelenting economy and social pressure have undermined some traditional civil society organization and strength. Other, in many cases, forces people to organize in the new ways.
What is good governance? Governance is like government. Governance can be good or bad. Bad government and bad governance have similar characteristics. Corruptions, whimsical and expedient decision making, short-sightedness, disregard for concern of the many and decisions. In the same vein, the criteria for good governance and would be the same as good governance. They include accountability and ethics in decision making and implementation, transparency and predictability, role-bound decision making and actions, responsiveness, a long-term view of the public interest. The public should therefore have a right to expect laws, a fair judicial system, politically accountable lawmaking, and effective and reform-minded bureaucracy. One of good governance is to enable an organization to do its work and fulfill its missions. Good governance results in organizational effectiveness. A lot of attention has been focused on good governance practices in the private sector in Canada, the United Kingdom, and elsewhere. In the corporate world of business, the bottom line provides a helpful focus point, but even here, there can be difficult questions of judgment as to what constitutes good governance. Current debate about corporate governance is just starting to look at questions about the broader purposes of the private corporations. The private sectors are expected to provide corporate social responsibility, which seeks to include sustainable development and the need to address the social, economic and environmental impact of virus operations. In public purpose organizations, good governance is about more getting the job done, especially in nonprofits, government agencies, and like where values typically play an important role in determining both organization purpose and style of operations. Process is as important as product. Good governance is about both achieving desired results and achieving them in the right way. Since the right way is largely shaped by the cultural norms and values of the organizations, must tailor its own definition of good governance to suit its needs and values. A number of multilateral organizations and institutions, the United Nations Development Program, the Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Asia Development Bank, have reflected on the elements of good governance and on their relations to development. As the ethos of experience of these institutions varies so do their perceptions of what constitutes good governance. The challenge for all societies is to create a system of governance that promotes, supports, and sustains human development, especially for the poorest and most marginal. But the search for a clearly articulated concept of governance has just begun. Good governance is, among other things, participatory, transparent, and accountable. It is also effective and equitable, and it promotes the rule of law. Good governance ensures that political, social, and economic priorities are based on broad consensus in society and that the voices of poorest and the most vulnerable are heard of decision making over the allocations of development resources. So we have the 8 characteristics of good governance by UNDP. Good governance is participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective and efficient, equitable, and inclusive, and follow the rule of law. It assures that corruption is minimized, the views of minorities are taken into account, and that the voices of the most vulnerable in society are heard in decision making. These core characteristics represent the ideal, and no society has them all. Even so, UNDP believes that societies should aim through broad-based and consensus building to define which of the core features are most important to them, what the best balances between the state and the market, how each socio-cultural and economic settings can move from here to there. Good governance have 8 major characteristics. It is participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, responsive, effective, and efficient, and equitable and exclusive, and follow the rule of law. It assures that corruption is minimized, the views of minorities are taken into account, and that the voices of the most vulnerable in society are heard in decision making. It is also responsive to the present future needs of society. Participation is by both men and women is a key cornerstone of good governance. All men and women should have voice in decision making, either directly or through legitimate immediate institutions that represent their interests. 2 is the role of law. Legal framework should be there should be fair and enforced impartially, particularly the notes on human rights. Transparency is built on the free flow of information, processes, institutions, and informations are directly accessible to those who will be affected by such decisions and their enforcement. It is also means that enough information is provided and that it is provided is easily understandable forms and media. Good governance requires that institutions and processes try to serve all stakeholders within a reasonable time frame. Next is consensus-oriented. Good governance mediates differing interests to reach a broad consensus on what is in the best interest of the group and where possible on policies and procedures. Effectiveness and efficiency is process and institutions produce results that meet needs while making the best use of resources. Accountability. It is decision maker in government, the private sector, and civil society organizations are accountable to the public as well as to institutional stakeholders. Four basic elements of good governance according to ADB. First is accountability. It is imperative to make public officials answerable for government behavior and responsive to the entity from which they derive their authority. Two is participation. The principle of participations derives from an acceptance that people at the heart of development, they are not only the ultimate beneficiaries of development but are also the agent of development. Latter capacity they act through groups of associations, trade unions, chambers of commerce, NGOs, political parties, and as individual through letters to newspaper editors participating in radio and televisions, talk show, and voting. Since development is both for and by the people, they need to have access to the institutions that promote it. Three is predictability. It refers to the existence of laws, regulations, and policies to regulate society under fair and consistent application. Four is transparency. Refers to the availability of information to general public and clarity about government rules, regulations, and decisions. Thus, it both complements and reinforces predictability. The difficulty with ensuring transparency is that only the generator of information may know about it and may limit access to it.
Factors, processes pushing for governance. The International Monetary Fund or IMF identified several factors, processes pushing for governance, good governance in particular. These are: the first one is the quest for growth and development, the second one the environmental movement, the third one globalization, and the last one is consolidation. The quest for growth and development. Many countries recognize that good governance is essential for achieving sustainable economic growth and development. Effective governance can attract investment, promote stability, and improve living standard. So, this statement highlights the importance of good governance in achieving sustainable economic growth, attracting investment, maintaining stability, and in enhancing living standard in countries seeking growth and development. The second one is the environmental movement. Environmental concerns have led to a call for good governance practices. Proper governance can help regulate and manage environmental resources, reduce pollution, and mitigate the impacts of climate change. So, the environmental movement seeks better governance to regulate resources, decrease population, and address climate change, driven by environmental concern and the need for effective management. The third one is globalization. As countries become more interconnected through globalization, there's a growing need for transparent and accountable governance to attract international investment, ensure fair trade, and manage global challenges effectively. So, globalization necessitates transparent, accountable governance for international investment, equitable trade, and effective global issue management due to increased interconnections among countries. So the last one is consolidation. The process of consolidating institutions and governance structures can lead to better efficiency, reduce corruption, and improve public service delivery. This is often a part of broader governance reforms. So consolidation enhance efficiency, curb corruption, and elevates public services. It's common element in broader governance reform efforts aiming for improvement.
Key issue and challenging in governance. Different set of force each influence the different stage of public policy making, namely decisions on including items in the agenda, developing any particular agenda item, passing legislations, and implementing new laws. Different constituencies exert their influences at different stages of policy development and execution. Preliminary conditions for good governance is the establishment of rule of law, which ultimately supplants the rule of whims and caprices of those in power. Number 1. Policies, issues, concerns, and challenges. Most people agree that the constitutional and legal frameworks in Philippines provide the foundations for good governance. The policy environment allows people's participation and public security and criticism of government operations and outputs. Further, the country has adequate laws, rules, and regulations to establishment order that move forward, while underdevelopment can easily be attributed to a lack institutional capacity and professional competencies to implement policies and enforce laws. Certain lessons learned and issues related to public policy making deserve mention. Ethics are conventional considered to be the actions taken in the formation and maintenance of the state of other governing entity. The concerned set of activities that are associated with making decisions in groups or other forms of power relations among individuals such as the distribution of resources of status. These include challenges such as great power competitions, terrorism, international cooperation, women rights, poverty and inequality, and the environment.
Table 2 Basic elements of good governance. 1. Accountability means making public officials answerable for government behavior and responsive to the entity from which they derive authority. Its key dimension is establishing criteria to measure performance of public official, institutionalizing mechanism to ensure that standards are met. Its specific areas of action is public sector management, public enterprise management, public financial management, and civil service reform. 2. Participation refers to enhancing people's access to and influence on public policy process. Its key dimension is undertaking development for and by the people. Specific areas of action is participation of beneficiaries and effective groups interface between government and the private sector, decentralization of public and service delivery function, empowerment of local government, cooperation with non-government organizations. 3. Predictability refers to the existence of laws, regulation, and policies to regulate society and the fear of consistent application of these. Its key dimension is establishing and sustaining appropriate legal and institutional arrangement, observing and upholding the rule of law, and maintaining consistency of public policies. Its specific areas of action is law development, legal framework for the private sector development. Lastly, transparency refers to the availability of information to the general public and clear government rules, regulation, and decision. Its key dimension is ensuring access to accurate and timely information about the economy and government policies. Its specific areas of action is disclosure of information. The five good governance principles, the UNDP principles and related UNDP texts on which they are based, the Institute on Governance has identified five principles of governance using the basis the UNDP's indicators of good governance. 1. Legitimacy and voice. Participation. All men and women should have a voice decision-making either directly or through legitimate intermediate institutions that represent their intention. Such broad participation is built on freedom of association and speech as well as capacities of participate constructively. Consensus orientation. Good governance mediates differing interests to reach a broad consensus on what is in the best interest of the group and where possible on policies and procedures. 2. Direction. Strategic vision. Leaders and the public have a broad and long-term perspective on good governance and human development along with the sense of what is needed for such development. There is also an understanding of the historical, cultural, and social complexities in which that perspective is grounded. 3. Performance. Responsiveness is institution and processes try to serve all stakeholders effectiveness and efficiency process and institutions produce results that met. For accountability. Accountability, decision makers in government, the private sector, and civil society organizations are accountable to the public as well as the institutional stakeholders. This accountability differs depending on the organization and whether the decision is internal or external. Transparency. Transparency is built on the free flow of all information. Process, institutions, and information are directly accessible to those concerned with them, and enough information is provided to understand and monitor them. 5. Fairness. Equity. All men and women have opportunities to improve or maintain their well-being. Rule of law. Legal frameworks should be fair and enforced impartially, particularly the laws of human beings. As reflected in discussions above, the different institutions and organizations has their own indicators or criteria of good governance which they can apply in their own organization or as useful tool of government as measures and good governance.